Jane Eyre, composed by Charlotte Bronte, is a clever that follows the life and encounters of its main protagonist, Jane Eyre, from her disturbed youth to her full-grown adulthood. Here is an itemized outline of the book. Jane Eyre is a stranded kid, living with her savage and affluent auntie, Mrs. Reed, at Gateshead Corridor. Mrs. Reed and her kids treat Jane brutally, and she feels segregated and disliked. At some point, after an especially unforgiving discipline, Jane swoons and is taken to the Red Room, an image of her misery and segregation. Mrs. Reed sends Jane away to Lowood School, a foundation establishment for stranded young ladies. At Lowood, Jane encounters further difficulty under the severe and deceptive administration of Mr. Brocklehurst, who subjects the young ladies to cruel day-to-day environments. Notwithstanding, Jane finds companionship and benevolence in Helen Consumes, an individual understudy, and Miss Sanctuary, a mindful educator. Helen at last passes on from utilization, extending Jane's feeling of misfortune. Notwithstanding the difficulties, Jane succeeds scholastically and in the long run turns into an educator at Lowood. Following quite a long while, she chooses to look for new encounters and freedom. She promotes for a tutor position and is employed by Mrs. Fairfax, the servant at Thornfield Corridor, to teach Adele Varens, an enthusiastic French young lady. At Thornfield, Jane meets the puzzling and agonizing expert of the house, Mr. Rochester. Albeit at first standoffish, Rochester becomes charmed by Jane's insight and soul. They foster a cozy relationship, with Rochester trusting in Jane about his grieved past and the puzzling occasions that happen at Thornfield, like weird chuckling and unexplained flames. Rochester at last proposes to Jane, and she happily acknowledges. Notwithstanding, their wedding is intruded on by Mr. Bricklayer, who uncovers that Rochester is as of now hitched to Bertha Bricklayer, a lady he keeps secured in the loft because of her craziness. Crushed by this disclosure, Jane won't be Rochester's escort and escapes Thornfield, regardless of her affection for him. Poor and down and out, Jane is taken in by the Waterways kin, St. John, Diana, and Mary. She is given sanctuary and a task as a town teacher. Jane finds that she and the stream's kin are cousins and that she has acquired a significant fortune from her uncle. She imparts her legacy to her recently discovered family. St. John, a dedicated and aggressive minister, proposes to Jane, encouraging her to go with him to India as his better half and evangelist accomplice. In spite of the fact that she appreciates his devotion, Jane declines, perceiving that wedding St. John would be a marriage without any trace of affection and enthusiasm. Jane feels areas of strength for to get back to Thornfield. She finds the manor burned to the ground, discovering that Bertha set the fire and died in it. Rochester attempted to save her yet lost his vision and a hand all the while. Jane reunites with Rochester, and they admit they're getting through adoration for one another. In spite of his actual impediments, Rochester stays the energetic and complex man Jane loves. Jane and Rochester wed, tracking down joy and satisfaction in their adoration. After some time, Rochester bit by bit recovers a portion of his sight. The original closures on a confident note, with Jane considering their coexistence and the significant association they share. Jane Eyre investigates topics of social class, orientation jobs, profound quality, and the battle for autonomy and self-confidence. Jane's excursion from an abused vagrant to a solid, confident lady reflects the clever's more extensive assessment of self-improvement and flexibility. The novel additionally digs into the intricacies of affection and reclamation, featuring the significance of uniformity and common regard in connections. Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre stays an immortal work of art, commended for its rich person improvement, close-to-home profundity, and social critique. Through Jane's encounters, the clever supporters for the worth of respectability, sympathy, and the quest for genuine bliss.